Does evolution disprove the Genesis creation account? For me, this video is not about a debate, nor is it meant to prove my view. For me, Genesis is a foundation of truth I can count on when things feel hopeless. It gives me a deeper hope than my emotions ever could. Since Darwin published his Origin of the Species book, and especially after the Scopes trial, the theory of evolution has been used to undermine Genesis. It is my opinion that we need to understand what is going on here so that we, individually and as Christians, will prosper. In order for us to make sense of all this, we must understand what evolution teaches and what it doesn't teach. Evolution is a process in which complex organisms mutate and natural selection eliminates harmful mutations, allowing living things to evolve into more complex forms. So even if evolution was true, it wouldn't overthrow Genesis. Evolution therefore needs life for evolution to work. When we think of our universe, we cannot invoke evolution to explain it. There are no mutations and natural selection at work. It is governed by the laws of physics. We also need to understand that evolution does not explain how life came from non-life. A rock cannot evolve through the mechanics of evolution. Evolution requires a lot of time. A strict chronological reading of Genesis seems not to allow that, so many people feel forced to choose. Is it the Bible or evolution that's true? My question is, what if we remove the debate between evolution and Genesis? But what if that's the wrong question? What if Genesis and evolution aren't even talking about the same thing? For the record, I don't find evolution convincing, but that's not why I trust Genesis. Evolution is a system that depends on physical laws and necessary elements, just as all other systems do. Evolution, therefore, is a mechanism, but we know that all mechanisms need a designer. There's a difference between every mechanism in your life and the person who thought of it. Science can tell you all about the Great Pyramids, but it can't tell you who thought of them or why they formed a belief system around them. That's only one example of millions. Genesis doesn't tell us how the universe was formed. It simply tells us that God created it. You might read a biography of an inventor, but it is unlikely to cover the physics behind their invention. It tells how the person came to think of the invention and the struggles it took to bring it to fruition. Once we understand what Genesis is talking about and what evolution teaches, we can read Genesis without worrying about evolution or time. Let science itself debate if the theory of evolution is true, and let Genesis give us the reason for everything. It is my opinion that if we stop engaging with Genesis over evolution, we will see atheists stop even caring about it. They care because they think they can disprove Genesis. Some Christians like James Ussher in the 1600s added up all the genealogies and concluded that Adam was created about 4004 BC. If you assume all of the creation happened in 6 days right before Adam, you end up with a universe that's about 6,000 years old. My point isn't to deny Adam's place in history. My point is reading Genesis faithfully doesn't require determining how long each act of creation took. As I explained in my last video, it seems unreasonable to understand our universe as less than 10,000 years old. However, that does not necessarily mean the 6 days of creation starting in verse 3 do not allow a chronological 6-day creation. If we understand that, These days refer to the earth, not the entire universe. Let me share some questions I have that challenge a chronology reading of Genesis. In my last video, I demonstrated I must believe the universe is old. The literal reading of evening and morning on days 1 through 3 are to be understood as literal sunset and sunrise, consistent with the idea that the universe was created in verse 1. Saying that the light on day 1 was some magical light that turned on and off seems like mythology rather than logic. I can explain more about that later. Answers in Genesis website says something like this. They argue that if the earth is old, that would mean millions of years of animal death, disease, and disaster before Adam. And they say that can't be called very good. There's a link in the description to this article. There is more here than I would like to unpack at this time, but let me say that the Bible says death came upon man, not all creation. Also, Adam was required to eat from the tree of life to live forever, which meant he was not physically immortal from the moment of his creation. And therefore, we should not suppose that animals were either. Plus, we are not told about something that the animals needed to eat to live forever. We have suffered for thousands of years because God has a purpose for it. We cannot assume that he did not have a purpose for animal death. Last point, if animals were not meant to die, they would have overpopulated very quickly. There's a lot to unpack here, but my main point is that there are plenty of unanswered questions when you have a strict chronologically reading of Genesis. So let me explain the framework view. There is a well-known view of Genesis derived from the words formless and void in Genesis 1 through 2, called the framework view. Essentially, we read the 6 days of creation as divided into two actions. One is the creation of the form, and the other is the feeling, addressing the formless and void state of the planet. Days 1 through 3 create environments of light, water, and sky, and then the dry land. Day 4 through 6 fill those environments with celestial bodies that aren't created but are made to rule the light. Birds and fish for the waters and sky, and animals and humans for the land. This view still holds that the days are literal 24-hour periods defined by a sunset and sunrise. However, they are used to celebrate or remind us that God created everything, not the time it took God to do so. Let me illustrate it this way. We have calendars for days, weeks, and months, which are used to schedule time. But they also remind us of events. Christmas is an international holiday, and we celebrate it on the 25th of December. But the story did not unfold in one day. So when we read about the events celebrated on one of the days of creation, it does not mean how long it took for the event to unfold. What the framework view does is serve the purpose of chapter 1 faithfully. It frees me from a scientific debate over the account and lets me focus on the main point. For its original audience, for you and me, there is only one God who created everything. It is not about scientific theories, but why our world is what it is. It tells us that there are not many gods, but one who is not part of the creation, but the designer of what it is to be. It gives purpose to mankind and worth to us all. For me, this view has helped me stop worrying about the latest scientific discoveries or figuring out which side of the debates are unbiased. It lets me focus on the story that frames my world and answers the big questions. There's so much more to this topic, and I know you have many unanswered questions. What I would like you to do is think about this and continue with me by subscribing as we answer tough questions with honest answers.